Hey guys, PIEGUYRULZ here, and I am with.
I'm EyeofSol from channel EyeofSol. You can call me Sol.
There will
And
be
I,
links in the description and everything.
I I do reviews of animation, so anything animated.
And we were going to talk about Pixar. So Finding Dory is coming out very soon, and that's kind of what got me started to thinking. Got me to thinking about how Pixar's been lately. I don't know if other people share this sentiment, but I assume you do based upon what you said to me about Pixar. Something changing around 2010 with Pixar, in that it went from a studio that kind of was up on top of the world, could do no wrong, just like obviously not perfect, but as perfect as a film studio could be. And now it's kind of been taken down a notch. So yeah, what does Pixar mean to you in the first place?
Well, Pixar has always been an animation studio that has always seemed dedicated to creating very good stories and very good characters. Like if you've looked at their early rundown of movies until about 2010ish, you could see that there was this real integrity going on at their studio where each each movie, other than Toy Story, was its own self-contained story, and they seemed dedicated to was telling a good story with good characters, great pacing, great animation. It's just their primary focus was to make good stories, but also have merchandise, like with A Bug's Life.
The other thing that Pixar is kind of famous for is that every film is like a new, not just that it was a new franchise, but it's a new thing. Toys, monsters, superheroes. They never really reused anything.
Yeah, even when they had a sequel in Toy Story 2, it still felt like a totally new thing. Toy Story 2 is a great example on how to do a sequel. You take what was established in the first movie and you use it to make a new thing instead of just staying stagnated in the old thing. Like most sequels choose to do.
And then even into Toy Story 3, which is probably, interestingly, what I would consider the last of like classic Pixar. That's a very interesting movie, and what they decided to do with it, instead of just like, well, here's another sequel, they decided to say, hey, no, time has passed in this world just like time has passed in our world. That they didn't choose any cop outs or any like, hey, everything's exactly as you knew it. No, the point of that movie was like, hey, things change. So what is your favorite Pixar film?
It's hard to say. I'd say that it's probably a three-way tie between Monsters Inc., Toy Story 3, and The Incredibles, for totally different reasons.
So you're on Team Incredibles. There's
Yeah,
always
yeah, yeah.
there,
I like The
there's
Incredibles.
always like a little feud between the Finding Nemo people and the Incredibles people, because they were both like the same time, and Finding Nemo was supposed to just kind of be this little like pet project on the back burner while Brad Bird did his like amazing epic superhero movie. And personally, I think The Incredibles is one of the weaker ones, and Finding Nemo is my favorite. Just throwing that out there. But why do you like those three?
So, Monsters Inc. is one of my favorites, mostly just because of the scale of it. When animated movies were kind of, at the time, just they were on a smaller scale. They were just sort of kind of getting into like the large public consciousness, as in like this is the thing you go see. And I mean CG animated movies, not like 2D animated movies. So Monsters Inc. just had this really good scope and scale to it, where you felt like even though the adventure was mostly just taking place in one place, it really had this huge kind of grandness to it, and it was really sweet as
How
well, which
about
is strange coming from me because I hate sweetness with a passion.
yeah, I mean, I totally get what you mean about the global thing. I mean, in a way, it's a world where there's all these portals around the world, and even though we don't see much of it, we see glimpses of like there's like a redneck trailer park. There's the just like a random kid's house. I think there's like one where they're in Japan or something. You just see like little glimpses of that, and also the climax with all the doors in that giant warehouse.
Oh
It
yeah.
doesn't get grander than that in terms of scale, literally.
Also, when you consider Pixar's previous lineup for Monsters Inc., there's Toy Story, A Bug's Life, and Toy Story 2. Those were all shown on a miniature scale, on the
Yeah.
scale of toys, on the scale of bugs, which is not a big scale. Monsters Inc. was the first movie that they made that had, like, at least 5-foot characters. It was on the scale of at least a human size.
if if I'm not mistaken, too, that's the first one to really feature. Well, I guess Toy Story does have Sid, but Boo is through the whole movie. At that point, they'd felt a lot more comfortable in doing CGI humans. Um, yeah. So what about Toy Story 3? One of my favorites as well.
Toy Story 3, I think the best part about it is it's respectful. It's respectful of the concept's roots from Toy Story and Toy Story 2, even with the large gap of time. I mean, there was 11 years between the two of them. So it's respectful of its property, it's respectful of its characters. The concept was necessary as an evolution. You know, a lot of sequels have concepts that are totally stupid and don't need to be made whatsoever, mentioned for later.
Yeah. If you were to insert spies into something completely random.
Yes. So it just has this really great respect for its concept, and holy crap, the ending is just, oh man, is so... I've heard people criticize that Andy, just a little bit of spoilers if you've never seen the movie, but I've heard people criticize Andy for saying that, no, this is not how a 17-year-old would act.
Oh, get out of here.
It's true that a 17-year-old would probably not play with a little girl, but the thing is that you have to see it as sort of a proxy for the audience.
I'll call nonsense on that. If I knew some, well, I don't know. I don't remember what affiliation Andy has with this kid. I guess not too much, but if there was like
mom is friends with the Bonnie's mom. That's pretty much it.
If it was a family friend and there's like this little girl there, of course you're gonna like get down on her level and play with toys with her. If it was like Andy playing by himself, that'd be very weird. But I think that's fair to say that you know, it's like when you have kids, you kind of get down on their level. You're not gonna. Sorry, I just totally derailed your point.
No, it's okay. I agree that it's not implausible that a 17-year-old kid would get down and play with a kid. I do admit that it is a bit corny at times, but I'm not talking about the part where he plays with the toys. I'm talking about the ending. The literal ending where, you know, Bonnie makes Woody wave goodbye at him. It's I hate to throw out really, really like hipstery buzzwords and everything, but I feel like the symbolism of that point is perfect. You know, it didn't require any words whatsoever. The music is perfect. It's such a powerful moment, and not to mention the climax too. The movie in the dump is just holy crap, man.
That got me. That actually, like, I teared up like a little bit. I'm like, wait a minute, what? They're not gonna like incinerate these toys. Like, what kind of a movie would this be if that happened? And I'm usually the first to be like, all right, they're never gonna do this. But even I was like, wow, this moment is just the way they have like the characters hold hands and the huge inferno. It's dark. It's interesting.
Yeah.
And yeah, all in all, in the film, it's like it's got a lot of these memorable set pieces as well. Toy Story 3, like the Mrs. Potato Head losing her. Oh gosh, it's her eye, right? It's not her.
Yeah,
ear.
it is.
It's her eye. Yeah, her losing that. Buzz turning into Spanish Buzz. Lotso, the strawberry smelling teddy bear. Like these are good set pieces that stick in your mind. You know, the cymbal banging monkey that had like one scene, but I remember him because of how creepy that thing is.
Mm-hmm. Like, and again, the movie's primary focus, even though it was capitalizing on the brand recognition of the previous two movies, the focus wasn't to sell merchandise. I mean, yes, they sold merchandise, obviously, but that wasn't the focus. The point of the movie was to tell a good story.
They explicitly
to wrap up the story and the character arcs.
They explicitly used a lot of older toys as well. And I think it's also one of those great examples of a Pixar film that's for everyone, because it represents, you know, the preschool aspect, and then it represents the kid going off to college aspect, which totally doesn't, you know, coincide with the people who are watching this movie compared to people who watched the first movie. And by that, I mean it does. You know, so yeah, I agree. Toy Story 3 is definitely one of the best ones, and it looks fantastic. But I mean, that can be said about all of the films.
Except Toy Story looks a bit janky nowadays with the dog that doesn't have bendable knees.
What about The Incredibles? So why do you like The Incredibles?
One thing I really like about The Incredibles, actually that I really like about most of Brad Bird's work, especially in The Iron Giant, is that he has this really interesting ability to take concepts that are very, very tired and overused and sort of make something new out of them, even when using these really old ideas. So with the Iron Giant, it was the whole invader from space kind of thing. And with the Incredibles, it was the whole superhero thing. You know, the whole concept of having these superheroes in hiding, who they're shunned for especially what makes them special, is sort of what gets me about the movie, is that these people are, well, for lack of a better word, they're incredible people. They could help. And yet, because people are scared of them, they make them hide. You know, if it was up to them, the superheroes, they could technically rule the entire world because they're superheroes. You know, they could destroy everything, but they don't. You know, they respect the rules. They listen to the government. There's so much behind the movie that I could talk about.
The Incredibles are on Team Iron Man, confirmed. Yeah, I'm going to say this now, and I'll probably end up saying this a few other times in this. Outside of Cars 2, I don't think there is a bad Pixar film. I really don't. When I speak like, when I say that I'm not as big a fan of The Incredibles, I mean that I don't think it's as good as Pixar's greatest work, which is admittedly on a very high pedestal. So I really don't mean to speak down to it at all. I think it is kind of like the best example of all these superhero cliches put together. It's one of those things where like a bad movie will have just like a cliche stock plot, but a good movie will take a bunch of cliches and make it into kind of like the core example of what a superhero film is. It's like the template for what it, you know, you got the spoilers, the villain who was created by the hero, which is like a huge trope in superhero shows and comic books and stuff. You have the heroes that are now older and have kids, and you have the kind of like spy aspect to it. I see like a lot of similarities with that, and even the superhero movies that are made like today. So it's a great film. But personally, my favorite will always be Finding Nemo. There is something about that film that really, really just gets me. You know, the visuals, again, all of them are stunning, but the visuals for that film, especially because it's all underwater, and they did things that, you know, like with like little water particles and the mines and the giant sharks and everything, it just looks so good. But that's not why I love it. You know, they've got the characters that stick in your mind so much that you couldn't forget them if you tried. You know, and the quotable lines, "Fish are friends, not food." But at the center of it all, and we'll get to this when we talk a little bit more about Finding Dory. At the center of Finding Nemo is a really interesting and relatable story about a father who went through a great loss and is now afraid of the world. And because he's afraid of the world, he won't let his kid experience it. And so his kid ends up being completely reckless because he never experienced it. And then both of them have to learn to take care of themselves, and that the world isn't just filled with bad people and bad things. The world is filled with a mixture of people that are going to help you and people, you know, that are misguided. That's why I love Finding Nemo.
I agree with you on every single point. The only thing I'm going to say, and this is just me personally, I have never spoken to another person who has agreed with me. So this is just me.
Oh boy.
I don't like Nemo. I think he's very annoying. He actively disobeys his father and basically gets himself in the situation because he disobeys his father. And I understand it's because his father is too overbearing, too protective. But seeing as someone, I'm a person who greatly dislikes children, especially when they disobey their parents.
Oh, gosh. So
just seeing a child disobey their parent like that is very frustrating to me. And I care more about Marlin and his entire journey, but I don't care that he rescues Nemo, you know, because Nemo disobeyed him.
The good news. Wow, that's some very brutal parenting.
Like luckily, I said, I haven't talked to a single person who agrees with me. That's just the way I feel because I have a very negative outlook on children and the way they disobey people.
Fair enough. I mean, don't worry, the comment section will be distracted about my feelings about Inside Out later.
I might be right there with you.
But no, well, luckily for you, the movie isn't about Nemo. Despite his name being in the title, it is about Marlin. It's about Big Nemo, as the kids call him.
Yeah.
Um,
That's why I'm saying I still
Yeah.
love the movie. Great movie. It's just not one of my favorites because of Nemo.
Understandable. In the end, the whole thing is Marlin and Nemo kind of coming to a compromise on, well, you got to let your kid experience the world, but at the same time, don't let him just go run off and touch some butts. You know, that bad things will happen.
Yeah.
All right, but moving on. So, you know, what we kind of really want to talk about here is the more recent Pixar films. And I hinted at this before, but I don't think any of these films outside of Cars 2 is strictly bad. I just think that for one reason or another, they're all inferior to what came before, not just in like, you know, entertainment and quality, but in terms of creativity. So first off, Cars 2, which is a film that I only for the first time saw today. I've never seen it. I saw clips, you know, I saw reviews, and nothing about it made me want to see it. My opinion on the first Cars is that I think it is like my least favorite of the Pixar films up to Cars 2. Not that it's bad, but that it's childish and that I'm not a car person. So Cars 2 off the bat wasn't going to be doing any favors with me, but then, yeah, I mean, where do you want to start? How about the spy angle?
Okay, can I just say something about the original Cars real quick?
No,
just
go
before
for
we
it.
move on? Okay, so just so you can kind of understand my feelings on it, is Cars, yeah, not the greatest Pixar movie whatsoever, but it does have one of the best atmospheres in all the Pixar movies with the Route 66 atmosphere.
American, like, down home country,
Yeah.
NASCAR, basically.
Yeah, they do a really good job of showing that. And I think that if you're in the right mood, even if you don't like the story or whatever, just the atmosphere is really good. And it's a basic story, you know, super basic, doesn't take you for any surprises. But I kind of like it just because of the atmosphere alone. Mater is incredibly stupid and annoying. Yeah,
but the other characters, there's tons of other characters in that movie too, even if they're only bit parts. They really kind of took great pains to show tons of different cars, and like they give them all goofy accents and personalities. There's a police car, there's a fire engine, there's, you know.
So yeah, other than the atmosphere, Cars is just really basic, but yeah, it does have one really good standout thing. But Cars 2, yeah, so the spy angle.
What was the motivation for this? I think I may have read something, or I may have made this up, but I guess this is what my guess would be, was that Pixar wanted to do a spy movie that was unrelated to any of their other franchises. Maybe it was just going to be a straight-up spy movie. Maybe it would be like a weird Pixar, like, I don't know, anthropomorphic guns or something. Like, probably not that, but you know what I mean. It'd be something quirky. And then Disney came in and was like, well, you see, Cars made us like $8 trillion, and that's a figure I'm just making up. That don't. So you got this spy script kind of half written, and you really want to do it. I'll tell you what, make Cars 2, and have tons of cars. Do you have any ideas of why this is a spy movie? Because there's no other justification. There's no, of all the franchises that they did, this makes the least, like, honestly, if you wanted to do Incredibles 2 and have it kind of be more spy themed, that would make a lot more sense.
Because naturally cars are not stealthy, you know, they're not, they may be fast, but only in a straight line.
Yeah.
You know.
How do they do a lot of the stuff they do is something that, you know, I think way too much about. So we can both agree that the spy angle was not anything close to a natural choice for this. The biggest problem for me is Mater.
Yeah,
he's what sinks it.
Don't even
bother.
You know.
Well, yeah, I mean, okay, everyone knows about Mater, but all right, how about then Mater and Mater's tie into the core theme of the movie, which is it's okay to be who you are, even if who you are is an idiot. Which I have no problem with. I agree with that lesson. It's not that Mater's an idiot that's a problem. It's that he's an in-your-face jerk. It's that everywhere he goes, he has to be the center of attention and scream and yell and do this and that. And Lightning is like apologizing for, you know, oh, I should have just let you be who you are. But it's like, no, you wanted to come to this fancy gala, and here you are running around and screaming and doing all this stuff. Like, it's not about your personality. You don't have to change your core personality, but just be a little bit more respectful.
Yeah, I know. It's okay. You're right. It's okay to be an idiot,
If that's who you are, yeah.
You can't be rude and obnoxious in places where it doesn't call for it. Like if you're just sitting at the bar or something and being rude and obnoxious, okay, whatever, it's a bar.
This isn't Radiator Springs. Lightning says it, and that's true. You go to you. He was the one that wanted to come to this stupid. And then there's also the whole thing with the lemons, which is a weird analogy because like. Maybe I missed this in the first film. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but is there any explanation as to how cars like come into the world?
No, never.
So then where do lemons fit in? Are they I mean it's weird because like we don't have an analog to that in real life. There aren't just like inferior people. Are cars supposed to be the lemons supposed to be an analogy for people with mental handicaps or physical handicaps or some sort of racism? I don't know, or are they just I think they're supposed to just be a stand-in for anyone who's a little bit weird, but the problem is that lemons are actually broken.
I think you're reading too deep into it, to be honest.
But see, that's the thing.
They had those two funny ones, well, I use the word funny loosely, but they had those two funny ones at the beginning of Cars, and I guess they just wanted to keep doing that.
In every other Pixar film up to that point, even I would argue Cars, the first one, has a message and has things that you can read into because it's there because they cared. They didn't care here. They really didn't care.
Yeah, it's true. The main focus, this is the very first Pixar movie that clearly was focused on merchandise entirely. They didn't care about the story. They didn't care about developing the characters in a meaningful, necessary way. I mean, who sat down? I can see here that it was directed by John Lasseter, which is crazy because it's John Lasseter. And, you know, it was written by kind of their core team, the story was written, like by their core team. So I don't get it. How did these incredibly talented people all sit down and say, so, we're gonna have a movie about cars who are spies.
What's weird?
Mater is going to be a spy, but he's not actually a spy. Oh, and shoehorn in a gigantically annoying environmental message as well.
Oh yeah, that was totally like out of nowhere too. But I mean, like, God, the villain was so predictable, and they still treat it like a twist, which is just that's so insulting.
Well, it's not made for you. That's the thing. This is the very first Pixar movie I'd say too that was undeniably made just for children.
Here's my point. What's weird about the Cars situation is that Disney had already greenlit, I believe by the time this came out or before, 2 Planes movies by Disney, not by Pixar. So I don't understand why Disney didn't just take over Cars 2. Was there something where Disney was like, look, we're gonna make this with or without you, so you might as well get on board, you know, and maybe they did it out of some sense of loyalty of like, let's try to steer this disaster ship. But yeah, I mean, everything, it's pretty awful. And the other core thing of the movie is Mater and Lightning's friendship, all of which we get to see none of in this film. I don't really remember all the details of the first movie, but from the start in this movie, Mater is screwing things up. Everything that Lightning does with him, he screws it up. So where is this friendship coming from? We need to, as an audience, even if they showed it in the first movie, you need to establish, hey, they have this bond because of reasons. Otherwise, it's just like everyone just loves Mater inexplicably.
Yeah, I know. And there's a difference between being a bumbling idiot, you know, sort of like a lovable moron kind of thing. It's sort of like Arthur from Arthur Christmas is technically sort of like a lovable moron kind of, but he's got a genuine niceness to him. Where even though he does silly things, you can really get into his character and sympathize with what he does. But Mater's just an idiot. He's not a lovable moron. Yeah. He's just a moron.
It's the Planet Sheen thing where you don't take your weird side characters and make them the protagonist. They're side characters for a reason.
Exactly.
I mean, as boring as Lightning McQueen is, this movie would have been infinitely better if he was the one in the spy position. He seems like a lot more picked to be a spy because he's a little bit blender, I guess.
But he's already famous, so that would be harder.
Oh, another thing I wanted to mention with this film is the international aspect of it, which, by the way, not unintentional. Movies that know that they are going to be huge, especially overseas, will put in scenes with Japanese and Chinese references and European references because they know that kills people overseas. They know people will go to see it. And sure enough, there's a Japanese scene, there's a English scene, and there's an Italian scene. And I think that's it. They don't even go further than that. But my issue with the whole globe-trotting thing is that there's already a weirdness, and the joke is that they're all cars. Why do we need weird Japanese toilet joke? I'm looking at this and I'm like, am I laughing because this is how a car goes to the bathroom? Or am I laughing because this is how Japanese toilets work? Oh, wait, no, I'm not laughing at all because this is awful.
I just want to say one thing that might contribute to why this film just feels so lazy and pointless. According to Wikipedia, which I know is not always the best source, but according to Wikipedia, Cars 2 was originally scheduled for a summer 2012 release, but Pixar moved the release up by a year.
Wow.
That's an entire year of development gone.
I believe it. And because of the way they make these films, because of course it takes a lot of work on the back end. And, I'll say it, even including this one, all Pixar films are beautiful. The one thing you can't really knock it for is the visuals. It looks good. Because it takes so much time for that, yes, they probably rushed the script. I would bet that they took a script that they were working on for something else, or they took a theme that they were working on and then just tried to make it work. And it doesn't. And this is the only, I'm looking at this on the same Wikipedia page for all the Pixar films. I'm looking at this chart, and it's like all Pixar films, all of them have amazing review numbers on Rotten Tomatoes and stuff, except for Cars 2, which has like a 39% on Rotten Tomatoes. Every single other one of them has at least a 74, and most of them are 90s. And this one, this is the one I would consider bad. And yeah, it's no reason, it's no wonder why. There's some very obvious things that were cash grab, and this is kind of a good jumping off point because I feel like that Pixar kind of got taken over by Disney, which is weird because they were taken over by Disney long before then. But this feels when Disney's style really started to kind of push into Pixar and how they make movies to sell toys and to make sequels. And that leads into the next film, Brave, which to me, the first thing I'll say, it feels like a Disney movie. And that comes with some good things. That comes with a lot of bad things. The core thing about Brave is that it's like the whole gimmick of the movie is that, look, it's a princess, but she can actually kick butt. And it's like, great, that's great. I'm glad. I'm not like dissing the thought of a princess or a female doing something for herself in a movie. That's freaking awesome. But that's not your gimmick. That's just normal life in 2010 at this point. You know what I mean? Like, we've had so many of these movies. Disney has dealt with decades of guilt, I guess, for having their female characters be just really wooden planks, for rescuing, that they feel the need to overcompensate. And I mean, like, look, I love Tangled, but there's an element of that in Tangled. I like Princess and the Frog. There's an element of that in The Princess and the Frog. Why can't we just have this princess or this female protagonist that kicks butt, but nobody ever draws attention to it because it's, yeah. Sorry, that's my tirade.
Yeah, you're right. So one thing of note is that this was the very first Pixar film to be directed by a woman.
Oh gosh, I didn't even know that.
And it very much shows, because of the whole, strong princess kind of thing. And yeah, you're right. If people hadn't been doing this for like the last 15 years or so, maybe it'd be like, oh no, she ripped her dress to fire an arrow. Oh, yeah. How scandalous. It's like, we've been doing this for like 15 years now. It's not really a surprise anymore. Pretty much everyone understands that women are just as capable as men. This sort
of gender imbalance in films like this only stops when you stop calling attention to it.
Exactly. It's like racism in that too. It's like, hey, look, we had a first black princess. It's like, oh, cool. You could have just done it instead of been all like woo about it.
I mean, if you want to go back, Mulan was like the first one that really did that, and Mulan is a great movie. And then ever since then, they've been trying to do this over and over again. It's like, look, you hit that point once. Mulan showed, yeah, princesses can kick butt. And then you didn't need to go back. And it's not even just with the animated films. All their weird, like, new live-action remakes of old Disney films are doing that whole princesses thing. But that's a whole other can of worms. But anyway, back to Brave. The other thing that kind of surprised me was that this movie was a lot like Brother Bear, which is a Disney movie that I hate.
Yeah, yeah. It's true. And the advertising for it was totally misleading as well. There was no mention anywhere, any of the trailers, nothing that said bears
Yeah,
whatsoever.
bears.
The first trailer actually looked really interesting too. It was like, oh, this looks like it could be really neat. But then bears.
Yeah.
And then like the latter half of the movie is entirely about bears. And it's like, okay, wasn't this supposed to be about a strong princess who does stuff?
And this is the thing that I'll keep going back to, is that old Pixar wouldn't have done something like this. And it's a movie about people too. Like, not that Pixar can't make a movie about actual people, but like outside of the bear thing, which is also just like really just weird. It was such a weird place to take the film. It's less creative than if this had been about anthropomorphic arrows. All right, I'm not good at this stuff, but obviously someone at Pixar is. Anthropomorphic castles.
The theme of motherhood in it is actually a good theme, because you don't see that all too often in animated movies with strong mothers and everything. That's neat. But why did they need to have bears involved? It could have just been a story about a queen and the troubles she has with her daughter. That could have been really interesting, but instead bears.
Yeah.
It's just like, no, stop with the bears. It's unnecessary.
I mean, to be honest, I don't even remember a lot of the movie, because all that sticks out in my mind is that this is another princess movie, and the princess doesn't want to just get married. The princess wants to have an action fun times, because it's 2010 or 2011 or whatever, and not actually the year that this is supposed to take place.
What I have against Brave is that even though it had really misleading advertising, a kind of bland story, a bland main character, and really ham-fisted message, it still won the Academy Award over Paranorman and Wreck-It Ralph, which sickens me.
This is why I have literally no faith in any award show. I put no stock into it. And the only reason that it bothers me so much is because other people do. Like, they'll put it on the box, and people will be like, "Oh, look at this movie, you should watch it because of it." And it's just like, yeah, there's a little bit of a Pixar bias.
A Pixar Disney bias. I mean, the only movie that's won that hasn't been Disney or Pixar in the last. Okay, so look, I've got here from 2001 to 2015 when they introduced animated pictures to
the Lego movie better be on there.
No. Okay, so let's see how many times someone else has won. So we got Rango in 2011, that's 1. We got Happy Feet in 2006, that's 2. We got Wallace and Gromit and the Curse of the Were-Rabbit, that's 3. Spirited Away, that's 4, and Shrek is 5. Everyone else is Disney.
No Lego movie, no Peanuts?
No. No, the Lego movie wasn't even nominated.
What?
No. And wait, I think Peanuts will be nominated for next Oscars.
Okay, that's
this
fair.
year's.
That's fair. But anyway, I mean, yeah, Brave. I my thoughts walking out of the theater when I saw it was like, that was okay.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like, but it's not Pixar, It's like, if this had been a Disney movie, I'd been like, yeah, this is about what I was expecting. But with Pixar, you expect more. Again, I think it's a fine movie from my memory. I would have to see it again to give an even more concrete stance. But yeah, less creative. Definitely, I think most people would agree that it's less creative than a movie about monsters or a movie about toys. Or
there's no denying, though, it's gorgeous and it sounds amazing too. Like, the score is just incredible, and the animation is just mind-blowingly good.
Obligatory.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right, so now Monsters University, which is this is basically like Cars 2, except it's not horrible. Where it's like, hey, you remember those wacky monsters and their weird jobs at the scare factory? What if they were in college? It's a college movie. It's an Animal House, but with no teeth, because it's for kids. Well, it's for it's for everyone, quote unquote. I enjoyed the movie. I walked out of it okay, but this isn't what I wanted from a Monsters, Inc. sequel. This wasn't a story that needed to be told. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. It may look nice and it sounds nice, but it doesn't have any reason to exist. It doesn't evolve the story. And anyway, we already know that Mike and Sully are going to end up friends in the end. We already know Randall's going to end up the bad guy for some reason.
they
We
don't
already
even,
know they're going to end up working at Monsters Inc. anyway, so what's the point?
they don't even play up Randall enough, in my opinion, because that's the one advantage of doing like a prequel is that you could have Randall around being their friend, and you can have Mr. Waternoose and characters that, you know, they couldn't be in the sequel, or I mean, they could be, but only as villains. Spoilers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and this is something I distinctly remember. It's a quote from one of the people at Pixar is that they didn't want to do sequels for the sake of doing sequels. They want to do sequels if they had a good story to tell. And I think that it's such a safe way out of doing a sequel because, I mean, you know, anyone that knows Monsters Inc. remembers that ending and is like, well, what, you know, where do you go from here with this story? And I don't know that you could do anything, but if you're gonna do, you know, if you're gonna do something else and you wanted a justified story, then one where Boo's a little bit older and the monster world has changed and things are different would be the way to go instead of just the lazy, they're in college.
I could argue that a good sequel, or at least a functioning sequel for Monsters Inc., would have been to not focus on Mike and Sully, to have them be in it, but Sully is already running Monsters Inc. at the end of Monsters Inc. Spoilers.
Yeah.
So they could have set a movie like 15 years in the future or something like that with an up-and-coming, you know, scare. This is just off the top of my head. So yeah, they could have had Mike and Sully be in a sequel, but they didn't have to be the focus. Yeah. You know, it's a huge world that they created. There are so many monsters, so many potentials that they could have had to tell stories from a different perspective. Like, what if a story where a human caught a monster, again, off the top of my head, a human caught a monster as it was trying to scare them, but he wasn't scared, he or she was not scared, and then decided to research the monster world, sort of like Dib from Invaders.
Or laughing, as is the ending of Monsters Inc.
And then the human, once they were more grown up, they got into the monster world, and then they wanted to become a laugher, scare, whatever themselves because they were interested in it. That's still better, I think, than just setting the monsters we're familiar with in college or university.
Absolutely, I totally agree. Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I remember, and yeah, you mentioned this or you wrote this down. The climax was cool.
It is
at the spoilers at the camp where they've got to scare. Well, they don't have to, but they're trying to avoid these humans, and they've got to scare them to get out of it. And there's the counselors and stuff like that. That was cool, and how dark everything was. That was pretty awesome.
Yeah, the atmosphere in that part's pretty good.
But even
reminds me of Alan Wake.
Even that kind of comes out of nowhere. And yeah, but and everything else. I mean, not just is it like a typical archetype college movie. Everything. Except I'd say the ending. The ending was a little surprising, but everything else was like by the books. Like, oh, they cheat. You know, there was the team came in last, but someone else cheated, so they get to go on. Oh, they cheated at the end. You know, oh, who would have actually monitored that weird setting on that machine? You know, like the whole buddies that hated each other in the prequel. It's just like.
It's so lazy.
I never watched Monsters Inc. thinking, man, I really wonder how those two became friends.
Yeah.
You know, like, who cares? I mean, they're friends. You know? Yeah, the only thing really surprising about that movie was the ending where they, like, didn't get back into school. Which in and of itself was kind of like a weird, like, kind of weird, poor message / writing choice. I mean, it was unexpected, but at the same time, it's like, so your message is to not go to college? And
I think the message is more, even if you fail, you can still achieve greatness.
Which is good, I mean, I'm not, you know, I'm not trying to look down on people who don't go to college or anything, but it is still a bit weird of a sentiment. And it is also like a rush job of like, well, we better get these people in the way they were at the beginning of Monsters, Inc. Better reset the status quo. Although I laughed at the mailroom thing because I was in How to Succeed in Business, you know, in high school, and this is the whole jokes about the mailroom. You work your way up, but so yeah, I mean, again, I walked out of that theater being happy with what I got, but not happy for like a Pixar film. It was entertaining fluff, and yeah, I mean, what would you say is the core message of this film? Is there one?
No, you know what I feel, and this is just conjecture because I don't know Pixar's inner workings, but I feel like maybe some of the people in Pixar were getting nostalgic for their university or college days, and they kind of just wanted to do something. Because, I mean, keep in mind, the people who work at Pixar are getting older,
Yeah.
and eventually they would have to feel nostalgic about something. So I think maybe they felt like setting it in a university to kind of maybe get some of that nostalgia back. Again, that's totally conjecture. It may have absolutely nothing to do with it, but I kind of get that feeling from it where, you know, it's like, oh yeah, college/university was like fun times all the times. And
But the part of the problem with that is that because it's a kids movie, it can't actually be like colleges. I mean,
know.
Don't get me wrong. I haven't had any wacky college adventures, but that's not.
Sorry, yeah.
No, I mean, but it's like that's not how fraternities work. And like, I know it's a kids movie, but why?
Yeah.
But you know, hey, you know what movie would have made a better prequel where they were like in college or something? How about The Incredibles? I would have paid to see Frozone and Mr. Incredible in college, like fighting crime or whatever.
Oh man, do you have any idea how good an idea that is?
Right? I don't know, this is the weird thing that I keep going back to because The Incredibles, of all the movies Disney's ever made, or Pixar's ever made, The Incredibles is the one that makes the most sense for the sequel. And it's coming, but it was nowhere near the first, sequel beyond Toy Story that they went with. I don't know why they postponed it for so long. We know that Cars 2 to make money and Monsters U, I don't know, but Incredibles makes the most sense for a sequel. They set one up, and even a prequel would be cool because we explicitly see in that film that there is a history with these characters before the, Superhuman Registration Act or whatever it was. There's a precedent for it, and they went with Monsters University.
It's true. It could have been, technically speaking, a lot of movies have already been done this way, but you have Brad Bird, one of the masters of taking old concepts and making them awesome again.
Mm-hmm.
You could have taken not just one superhero origin story, but a ton of them and put them together and told us that story, and then led up to Incredibles. That's a great idea. You just need to have it be written properly.
All right. So Inside Out.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to first say that this film was hyped to me to no end. It really was. And I didn't go into it with, huge expectations, but when you have a comment section that gets on you hard about, you need to see this movie, it's the best movie ever, cinematic masterpiece, I don't know. My expectations were probably a little weird for this film because of that. And I'm just going to acknowledge that up front. I'm not going to try to claim that my opinion is pure and unbiased and whatever. But I was disappointed. Obligatory. I don't think this is a bad movie. I just don't think that it's Pixar greatness again. People are saying that this is like the film that brought Pixar back to its roots. And in a way it did because it's not a sequel. And it's a creative idea that I would not have expected. I mean, yeah, you can make the Osmosis Jones, parallels all you want, but even still, it's a relatively original concept. Of these characters in the head working behind the scenes to make a person who a person is. The thing about Inside Out is that, and I guess this is my expectations, I went in expecting to see a lot more of Riley and Riley's life as a middle schooler who is moved to a new town and who is kind of awkward and is going through a lot of stuff right now. And OMG, it's so emotional. And what I got with this film was a lot of the high fantasy stuff, of the crazy journey through Imagination Land and the dream sequence. You got to wake Riley up with a crazy dream. And there's the train of thought. There's all this stuff. And it's like, this is cool and all. I mean, this is what I kind of expect from Pixar, but this isn't where the emotional core of this film is. This is not where the relatability is. You have a protagonist that's boring. She's joy. Yay. That's it. And I know no one needs to say protagonist that was designed that way. I know her character is joy. I get it. I'm not dissing the core premise, but if Riley isn't going to be the protagonist and it's going to be joy, I need to get a little more than just happy, 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 happy. Oh no, things are going bad. Happy, 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 happy. That's boring to me.
Yeah, that's fair. Also, it gives off this sort of weird connotation that the characters are not characters. They're basically just puppets for their inner characters, which sounds like it would be an interesting concept, but it's actually kind of messed up. Because what that basically says to me, personally, is that nobody is anybody. They all have these other people who are governing who they are. And the weird thing is that these emotions, these inner governing emotions, have their own emotions. Like Joy, spoilers,
Yeah.
starts crying out of sadness. But she's the physical embodiment of joy. How can you cry?
See, that's the other thing about this film that bugged me. Not just that I didn't get to see enough of Riley, but that I didn't get to see enough of the other emotions. Because the bulk of the film, and we're going to go into deep spoiler territory, so you know. But the bulk of the film is joy, sadness, and wacky imaginary friend doing this weird adventure through Imagination Land, which is not as cool as the one in South Park, just pointing that out.
There's less death.
Yeah, there's less religious figures. And there's occasional cutting back to anger, disgust, and fear. But yeah, the bulk of the film you're spent with joy, sadness, and the imaginary friend. The imaginary friend is probably the best of them because he is actually allowed to have multiple emotions. But if the film had kind of stuck to all of those emotions in the same place at the same time, if they all went on the journey or they all were in the control room, we'd have a lot more balance in the film, because the 5 of them or the 6 of them, however many there is, would add up to one complete character. But when it's just joy and sadness and an imaginary friend who, you know, most of the time is joy as well, it ends up being a little bit boring emotionally, ironically.
And that's actually a good point. It's because a lot of people have said that this movie is like an emotional powerhouse.
I didn't feel it. Sorry.
No pun intended. I did. I'm not gonna lie. I cried 3 times in this movie, mostly during the end. But it wasn't because of the movie. So I'll give you a really good example of this. So it's actually not movie related, but whatever. So there's the game, Professor Layton and the Unwound Future. Not such a good game. It's just kind of puzzles, and that's basically
Well, I've played a different Professor Layton game, and I enjoyed it. But anyway.
So, no, I love the Professor Layton games. But they're not really good games. They just have really good stories and characters. But anyway. So at the end of these 3 games, so Curious Village, Diabolical Box, and then Unwound Future is the last one, until it restarted, but whatever. It tells the story, major spoilers, of Professor Layton losing his girlfriend again. So she already died, and then she gets catapulted into the future, where she has to die again right in front of his face. For the first time, you see Professor Layton cry. And it's heartbreaking. It's one of the saddest things I've ever seen in my entire life, and it made me cry. And it still makes me cry to this day. But I'm crying for the character. I'm crying because he is so broken and miserable because he had to lose his girlfriend not once, but twice. And there's nothing he can do about it. And he nearly got beaten to death as a result, too. So I'm crying for the character. But in Inside Out, I'm not crying for Riley when she, spoilers, runs away and then comes home and she gets all emotional with her parents and everything. I'm not crying for the character. I'm crying because I'm thinking about a similar situation that happened to me in my life.
Yeah.
I ran away from home at one point. It was pretty stupid. But, you know, and I came home and I cried. And it reminds me of that, so it makes me cry. So I'm not crying for anyone. I'm crying for myself.
Basically, yeah, I mean, the scene that I felt the most empathy for Riley was when she was in class and kind of having a bit of a breakdown. And I felt that because, yeah, I mean, nothing to that extreme, but I've had days in school where I was just kind of like not all there emotionally, and you know, little things kind of set me off in weird ways. Like, I think that's kind of a relatable thing. But part of the problem, I guess, is also that Riley, you kind of touched on this, but Riley isn't a character because all these other characters are the characters. It's like rooting for a robot that is controlled by someone else. You don't, and like, what is Riley's journey? If they were to make a sequel to this in a few years called Outside In, that's purely from Riley's perspective, which Pixar,
Yeah.
What is Riley's actual journey? Like, why does she realize that running away from home is stupid? She just kind of has this epiphany. She doesn't really nothing, because everything has to come from within, because Joy is the protagonist that does everything in this movie. Riley doesn't do anything to get better. You know what I mean? Like, Riley has a cruddy day at school, cruddy day at ice hockey practice. You know, she runs away. What changes? I guess the fact that her parents care about her and she embraces sadness. You know, but okay. But what does she do?
yeah, she doesn't technically make the decision,
Mm-hmm.
because when Joy and Sadness finally make it back to the control room, Sadness takes the idea out of her, and oh, it's so deep and symbolic and everything. And it's like, no, I'm talking like a physical embodiment of Sadness literally removed the idea from her.
Yeah.
Like a robot. You're right. It's like a puppet or a robot. You know, it's just if, let's say hypothetically, if this wasn't a movie, that Joy and Sadness didn't make it in time, she would have just ran away because she already had the idea in her head.
Yeah.
You know, she would have gone. But it's because of the actions of the inner characters that she changes her mind and goes back home and everything. And yeah, it's a good message and everything, you know, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, you're right. It's that Riley doesn't make decisions. It's the people inside her head that do, and that's creepy. That's
those are one-dimensional caricatures. Okay, so back on the message of the film, that's another thing that I felt was not something that was built up appropriately. I mean, obviously it's set up with Joy and everything, that Joy takes her job too seriously and she wants to be the one controlling Riley at all times. And, you know, it makes sense. You'd want her to be joyful. But the message of the movie, as I interpret it anyway, is that it's okay to be sad because that alerts other people that something is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't really say why it's okay to be sad very much. Joy just kind of comes to accept that it's an emotion. Like, why does sadness have to be there? I mean, we know as in the real world, you know, sadness is an emotion. It's not something that you control. It's just something that you feel. But like, and you know, it's an appropriate emotional response at times. But like, why? I don't know. I don't feel like the message was carefully interwoven into this story. I feel like the message was just popped up at the end. That's like, well, you got to have some reason. There had to be some point to this movie. You know, it can't be like Monsters U and Cars 2 where there just like was no point. They had to have something because they wanted people to feel like it was old Pixar again.
Yeah. I think that's the only thing I'm gonna have to disagree with you on about the message of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think was actually one of the better things about it, is that it's not so much that sadness alerts other people that something's wrong. It's more that the message of the movie is that sadness is okay to feel. It's a natural response, but it's okay to feel because it helps us grow as people. You know, sadness is one of the worst things to feel. It's literally the worst thing to feel. It's terrible when you feel sad, but it's true. The sadder you feel, you have to move on from it at some point. So it's like the scene, spoilers again, with Sadness and Bing Bong when he loses his, you know, little rocket thing.
Mm-hmm.
He starts talking to Sadness about, you know, how he and Riley had good times with it together, and then he gets sad, but then that allows him to move on because he felt that sadness. So,
all right.
Yeah, so it's like, in sort of a less extreme example, it's sort of like when you were like eating an ice cream cone and you dropped it on the floor by accident. It's like, okay, maybe you're like 9 and you cry a bit. You know, you're like,
it's an appropriate emotional response.
Yeah, you're like, I lost my ice cream. But then you just sort of move on.
Mm-hmm.
Your ice cream is gone. But then if you, let's say you didn't feel sadness about it, you just kind of stared at your ice cream on the ground, you just walk over and move on. You're not dealing with it. You know, you're just sort of not doing anything to it. So sadness, it shows that sadness is just as important as happiness. We want to always be happy, but we can't. Because if we're always happy, we can't evolve as people.
That's fair. I mean, it might be that I just missed it subtly throughout the film. I just didn't think that it was interwoven into the narrative as much as it should have been, I guess. But I mean, I feel like a lot of this movie was spent with the wacky. So, like, what did you feel during like the dream sequence, like when they were making the weird dream? Like, did you like that? Because personally, I felt like I was being talked down to, and like with the stupid giant clown, like I felt like this is the stuff to get the little kids in the audience that are actually afraid of clowns.
Yeah, which is sort of counterintuitive, because if a child is afraid of clowns, they don't really want to stay there. No, I feel like that part was actually a very big missed opportunity, because no matter what you can say, it's true that children are afraid of things that are much bigger than that. being afraid of clowns and broccoli and darkness from the basement are very base fears. You know, they're childish fears. Not so much clowns. I can kind of understand that, but you know, so they're base fears. They're based on physical embodiments. But then everybody, even every child, has a fear of the unknown. They have a fear of death. It's just innate. So I feel like they could have gone like really dark with it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, something that would be absolutely much more terrifying than broccoli or clowns. So when they said in the part of the movie, they're like, oh, we're taking you to the subconscious or whatever, I'm like, oh man, this could be a really good opportunity to show some actually really terrifying stuff.
Yeah.
Not like horror movie level terrifying, but some, you know, they could have shown fear of the unknown, something intangible. But then when you put like a big clown face on, it's like, well, this isn't scary. Yeah. Riley finds it scary, but I don't.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I mean, I think the movie doesn't have much in terms of teeth. Like, the big climax is that Riley almost runs away. Like, they don't even really have a runaway. She plans it. She steals. I mean, that's like the you know, the kind of the darkest place that it went. Yeah. I mean, look, there was obviously a lot of creativity put in this film that I obviously didn't see in Brave, Monsters U, or Cars 2. I saw it here. I may not have been a fan of all of the creative choices they made, but like little things like the train of thought is a literal train. You know, there's these core personality traits that make up who you are, you know, core memories that make up who you are. There's these little islands that represent that. There's a control panel. I like when Riley was a baby, how it was just a button. You can only experience one emotion at a time. You know, well, I mean, I guess that's Riley up. That's the point of the movie, that she could only experience one emotion at a time. But yeah, like I liked little stylistic things, and I didn't dislike this movie. I just came away from it feeling like there was a more emotional, interesting story in there somewhere, but it got buried in all of the childish stuff, and Joy was boring.
Yeah. I would agree with you on everything other than just the interpretation of the moral, which I think, was maybe a little bit deeper than you're giving it credit for, but
possibly. It's entirely possible I just missed some of it, but
yeah.
All right, so you know where to send the hate mail.
Yeah, feel free to send me some too. I get a lot of it.
All right, now on to the Good Dinosaur, which oh boy,
yeah.
I liked more than Inside Out.
Really?
I'm sorry, world. I'm so sorry. Yeah. I enjoyed it. Yeah, I mean, well, again, I enjoyed all of these, but I liked it probably the most out of all of these films that came after Toy Story 3. I really enjoyed it. There was the story was, and spoilers, the story was basic, is as basic as you can be in a lot of ways. It's a boy and his dog. It's a, you know, timid kid gets thrown out into the wilderness, has to survive and make it back home. It's the, you know, kid that needs to leave his mark on the place, but his father dies. Ooh. You know, there's a lot of stuff that's cribbed from like The Lion King, like other Disney movies. But I liked the characters. I liked the animation, of course, you know, all of it. But this one, even more than anything else, looked real in places. Which is,
oh my god, the animation just floored me.
That's a triumph. Like that's amazing. Mm-hmm. So you know, I like that. I like the characters. I liked, you know, I like the atmosphere of the film. I like the score. So yeah, I mean, the plot is not something to write home about. And if this were an earlier Pixar film, I think it might have been. But I enjoyed it for the overall package. And it was dark. I should say, as there are a lot of elements in this film that are childish. Like, the name of the film, The Good Dinosaur, is incredibly stupid. Because there are really no bad dinosaurs. I mean, there's a few maybe in the movie, but it's not like dinosaurs are all evil and then this one decides to be good. It's not what the movie is. And
that's
also
the impression I would have got too, as in like he's the one solitary good dinosaur
that befriends the human. But the design of the main character and his friend or his family are all, I think it looks stupid. The color, I think it should have been a darker color. I think he should have looked more like Littlefoot than he did, you know, like a little green dinosaur toy. But outside of those, there's character, father dies. There's characters that the kid murders like a bug, which I know it's a bug, but he's like a giant bug. You know, there's T-Rexes doing what T-Rexes do. They don't like eat anyone, but they like freaking bite these other dinosaurs and have scars on them and stuff. It reminded me a lot of The Land Before Time, in a way. Not as emotional, but in a way. What did you think?
Well, before you kill me, I'm just going to say I've never seen The Land Before Time.
Oh, no.
No, I haven't seen it.
That's fine.
It's on my list, but anyway. So I have nothing to compare The Good Dinosaur to in terms of other dinosaur movies, because I hate dinosaur movies. I find them... The problem is, this is going to sound like incredibly petty to you, but the big problem I have with anything prehistoric, that includes The Croods as well, this goes as well for DreamWorks movie The Croods, is that you can't prove that this is the way that it happened. As in, that you can't prove this is the way that the dinosaurs looked. Yeah, you have fossil evidence and everything, but that's... You keep finding new evidence to say that these look different. Like, just recently I saw that apparently T-Rexes, they theorized have big lips. As in, their chief didn't show all the time.
Yeah, I was actually thinking... I was actually wondering if T-Rexes were going to have, like, feathers or something in this movie just to try to keep up with what science was saying.
Yeah, so I think that's the big problem I have, is that you're taking something that really happened and just doing whatever you want with it.
Well, to be fair, I'm glad that the movie actually did this, because most other films wouldn't do it. They did have the opening scene where the meteor didn't hit the Earth. They explicitly give reason as to why, and of course, that's not something we even know 100% happened, the meteor and everything. But at least they did give a reason as to why there's humans and dinosaurs at the same time. It's not just like weird Ice Age rules or whatever.
Yeah, because there's no rules.
Nah. But outside of that, did you enjoy this movie at all?
I'm just saying, that's very petty. That's just a big kind of thing with me. I'm not saying that if you feel that way, or if you don't feel that way, you're wrong. That's just totally me.
Yeah, we all have personal hang-ups about things. Sorry.
Yeah. No, the big problem I have with this movie is that it is so formulaic. And when you're a reviewer like me, you start to notice all this kind of stuff where it's just so similar to each other that you can predict it.
Yeah.
And it makes you feel like crap when you do that, because like, oh, well, now you're a know-it-all. But it's like, no, it's so tropey and predictable that I literally called every single thing that was going to happen. Oh, the storm's coming, Dad's going to die. Oh, the bushes are rustling, it's going to be the kid. Oh, the guys are flying overhead, they're too eager to help, they're going to be bad guys. You know, that kind of thing.
The dad, he hits his head and the dad's going to appear in a vision. Yeah. I'm not going to argue that. I agree.
Yeah, it literally could not be more formulaic.
And even to Pixar films, there was a feeling of Finding Nemo here, where it's like he's got to go through this journey to find himself and live in the outside world. But then what really got me with the Finding Nemo was like he came across all of these weird, colorful characters that, most of them tried to help him, but they were all kind of quirky. That was very kind of Finding Nemo-esque. And like I said, there were parts that were Lion King-esque, and other parts that were like every other dinosaur movie out there.
Should have been called Finding Arlo.
Yeah.
But so this is actually something. So you know how I said with Monsters Inc. it has this really huge scale to it, despite taking place in only one location for the most part. The Good Dinosaur takes place over a very large location, and yet it never feels that way. It always feels like they're in the same place. Sorry, Arlo is in the same place. The scenery does change, but I don't get that same feeling of scale with this movie that Monsters Inc. has, where
it looks like his journey took like a week instead of like an epic month of travel. Yeah,
it's the same thing with Up as well. I don't get any sense of scale there, because don't you think that flying a house on balloons to South America would take months and months and months? I don't care if you hit a storm or whatever, it would take a long time. And then they just walk to the falls too, and sometimes it looks like they're in the forest, and sometimes they're on the cliff top. It's weird. I just don't get any sense of scale from the movie, even though the environments are massive and they look amazing. I just don't get any of that here. And that's the thing, is it would have been better, spoilers again, for Arlo to figure out that he had to follow the river to get home, instead of his dad just like, oh, remember, follow the river to get home. It's like, oh, well, you just set up basically the entire journey. He doesn't have to go away from the river, so he's not going to experience anything fascinating. It looks nice, but it doesn't... You don't really go anywhere. You don't get any sense of that he's progressing. Sometimes he's by the riverbank, sometimes he's at the top of a mountain, whatever. But so? you know, you might as well have just set it all on the riverbank. You don't, and then sometimes he's running across a big open field or whatever. But again, you don't get this sense of progression. It's just sort of, oh, there's the mountain, let's head towards the mountain, and now we're home.
I mean, that's fair. And, also, we don't really get a sense of why this kid sticks with Arlo. There's like no reason to it. I mean, at first, food, but Arlo doesn't have any food on him. The kid just likes him like a pet, which, all right. Yeah, I mean, again, I don't think that this is Pixar's return to form or anything. I don't think that this is, just the most amazing thing. But I guess to me, the spectacle worked. It was way more straightforward than the more high concept Inside Out, which Inside Out is a concept that feels more at home in Pixar. But this film just really captured something. I don't know. It really, I guess it's like one of those things where as an overall film, there are definitely a lot of problems with it, but there is something in it that just kind of works for me and just clicks, like, I don't know. But I enjoyed the viewing experience more than I liked Inside Out. I kind of hate to say that because I know people are going to get on me for that, but I found Arlo to be more interesting than Joy. And there wasn't too much that I felt like was being talked down to me. I mean, again, the advertising and the design and the title are, but I didn't feel like anything else was. It's a coming of age story, and I mean, both Inside Out and A Good Dinosaur are coming of age stories. It's just Inside Out makes you a weird homunculus that is being controlled by one-note boring characters. Whereas The Good Dinosaur is a boring story with, I don't even want to say that characters are complex, but they're relatable and interesting.
Well, just the problem with, one of the big problems with The Good Dinosaur is that you would think that it would be a story just about, from the way it's set up, it would just be about Arlo and Mowgli. And I know he calls him Spot, but I call him Mowgli because I don't know. He just reminds me of Mowgli. But anyway.
I call him Donnie. But yeah.
Okay. I think maybe it would have been better either to have it live up to its name, where it was just Arlo venturing through all these other dinosaurs who want to kill him or whatever. Mm-hmm. Or just have it be a story about just Arlo and just Mowgli / Spot. Because when you put them together, one of them is going to be overshadowed. So in the latter half, Mowgli gets overshadowed by these colorful characters who get introduced, like the T-Rex family. It's like, I totally forgot that Mowgli Spot was in the movie.
All right.
Just for bits.
I'll tell you what. You've talked down the movie enough. I officially lower how I feel about it.
No, that's not the point of what I'm trying to say.
No. That kind of sounded like manipulative and weird, but there wasn't. But genuinely, you're pointing things out that I agree with. And so, yeah, I mean, let me put it this way. I guess I had about as good a viewing experience as I did with Inside Out.
Oh, and there's one other thing, too. A big logistic problem I have with it is that, again, spoilers, in the beginning, when Arlo's dad dies, when he gets swept away by the flood, the same exact thing happens to Arlo, but he doesn't die. So why is it that a larger, stronger dinosaur dies, but a smaller, weaker dinosaur doesn't? I don't get it.
The same thing that keeps making these monsoons come out of nowhere.
Yeah, that's so plot convenient.
The storm! Storm!
It's like the storm in James and the Giant Peach. It just kind of appears when it feels like it.
Yeah. All right, so, I'll definitely give you that, and I'll agree. I mean, I don't think it's not up to Pixar standard. I mean, like, again, I don't mean to be a broken record, but looking at all of these movies, Cars 2 very easily looks like a cash-in. It's a sequel, and it's a sequel that isn't very good even by any standards. Even by non-Pixar standards, like by the general populace thinks that this film is terrible.
Garbage.
Brave feels like just kind of forgettable, and a lot some of the cliches that have been seen before. Monsters University is an unnecessary sequel. Really, any way you slice it, it is. Even if you enjoyed it, as I did, it's unnecessary. Inside Out, a lot of people love, but I still feel like it didn't hit the right points that it needed to to be that Pixar epic. And The Good Dinosaur, yeah, it's played out. In a lot of ways, it is predictable, it played out. So what do you think Pixar kind of went down like this?
Well, again, I'm not a Pixar insider, so this is totally conjecture. But as someone who is sort of knowledgeable about the movie scene, I think that one big reason why Pixar and just movie companies in general have kind of gone downwards and Disney has kind of gone upwards is that they're focusing more on homogenizing the experience, as in they're making it as broad an experience as possible to appeal to everybody. And this isn't necessarily anybody's fault because these movies are so expensive to make. They cost so much to make that they have to get a return if they want to keep making movies. They have to at least break even. So they have to just generalize the experience for everybody. So they have to make the experience as generalized as possible to appeal to as many possible people. And that doesn't mean they can't have ideas that are sort of outlandish or weird or anything more thought-provoking, but it means that they can't really take as many risks as they used to. They can't really establish what they used to because they might end up cutting out a core part of their demographic and lose on a big chunk of money. So it's not so much, especially because of the foreign market as well, they have to make a story that can be understandable to a foreign market too. Yeah. You know, they can't just, it's like Cars probably wouldn't appeal to a Chinese market because it's an American story. You know,
which is weird because they would make the sequel specifically appeal to that.
They had to make the experience as generalized as possible in order to get the largest return on their movies. And because they're Pixar/Disney, they don't have to worry so much about critical results because parents will always take their children to see a Disney or Pixar movie because it's a name that they trust. They know that they're not going to give them an offensive, overly challenging experience anymore because that's just not the way it is.
If you ask like any just average adult what like animation company, I mean outside of like Disney, they're going to say Pixar. Like which would you like to take your kids to the most? Which movies? Pixar. Right? Because the other ones are like either not well known enough, like Illumination or whatever. They don't have the household name like Pixar does.
Or Laika, one of the greatest animation companies ever.
I've never heard of it.
Come on!
I'm not a movie person. Or like DreamWorks, which is like incredibly inconsistent in what it puts out. Although it's gotten pretty good lately. How to Train Your Dragon.
Yeah.
But I mean, also I think that Pixar was just that good in its first, 12 whatever films up to Toy Story 3 that it's inevitable that a crash is going to come. No studio can remain perfect. And Pixar had the benefit of not releasing that many movies and being relatively new, so it's not like a studio that's been going on for 100 years like most of the other ones. But yeah, I mean, sooner or later they were going to put out a Cars 2. Whether it was like intentionally cash grabby or just like a well-intentioned thing that ended up being just a terrible, confusing movie, it was going to happen. But or the other thing I was thinking was that you always hear of that like famous dinner meeting that the Pixar greats had where they came up with like WALL-E and Toy Story and like all of these movies, like 70% of their first 12 movies were from that meeting. In the beginning, they had a boom of ideas and they were visionaries, and now maybe they're out of the ideas that they had in that original pile, and some new people have come in, some older people have left, I'm sure. So maybe it's just they had a great vision from the start, and now things are changing, and they don't quite know where to go. Maybe they are trying their absolute. Maybe Cars was an earnest attempt. Cars 2, even if Disney did push it, maybe there was an earnest attempt to tell a movie there. I mean, I'm sure there was. I'm sure they didn't set out to make a bad movie. No one does, even if they're setting out to, cash in. They're not trying to make something bad. It's just...
it just happens sometimes.
So basically, Disney.
Yeah. But I think one thing that Pixar/Disney gets away with much more than other companies, like let's say Warner Brothers made a movie that was garbage, everyone would tear it to pieces because it's Warner Brothers. So I tore The Dark Knight Rises to pieces because I greatly disliked that movie.
I agree.
And there's a reason why, but I'm not going to explain why because it would take too long, and that's not what this is about. But anyway, I greatly disliked The Dark Knight Rises, and I would tear it to pieces, but that's because I'm a critic. you know, I look at things with an analytical eye, and I try to pick out what's bad about it as well as highlight what's good. But Pixar and Disney are for children, and children are not. No, I'm just saying their general idea is that they're for children, and children are not critics. So even if the movie sucks, and I mean really sucks, parents will always take their children to see it because a child isn't going to say, oh, I think that this method is flawed, that the progression of this movie is rather stagnant. You know, no child is ever going to say that. So it's just an excuse for parents to shut their children up for a little while because they're not going to analyze the movie and say, you know, oh, Mom, I don't want to go back to Pixar movies. Their method is flawed. You know, they're just going to enjoy the bright characters and sparkly colors and all that crap. But then when they get older, then they can analyze the movies and, you know, oh, maybe this movie actually wasn't so bad or so good. But at that point, Disney Pixar has your money, so they don't care.
I'll somewhat disagree with you in that, yes, no kid is going to walk out saying, like, oh, the symbolism of that film was simply sublime. I don't say that. You know, there's a famous quote by a brilliant critic that is fictional. You may not have noticed it, but your brain did. In that, yes, the kids aren't going to consciously notice that, but Cars 2 is panned. I've heard from a lot of kids who didn't like Cars 2. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of kids who do like Cars 2, but a lot of the stuff that's considered good filmmaking and people analyze is stuff that works on a base level, even if the common person wouldn't point it out as such. You know, like as a kid, I didn't think about the core messages of Finding Nemo, but here I am senior year and I'm writing an essay about it. And I'm like thinking like, wait, no, I kind of like knew that about the film. I kind of knew that there was that element. And, you know, maybe I liked the film a lot more because my parents were a little bit more protective of me than they should have been. And, you know, that kind of message resonated with me. But I think it's a double-edged sword with Pixar's reputation because, yes, the average person is just going to say, oh, it's a Pixar movie. It's a good movie. Yeah. But then critics like us, myself, I say negative things about these movies, even though I think that a lot of these movies are good, because Pixar sets such a high standard, I'm going to be critical. If this was DreamWorks putting out, you know, Monsters University, I wouldn't care. You know, I wouldn't care as much, and I wouldn't, you know, I'd be like, hey, I enjoyed that movie. Yeah, you know, it did this, and this. I wouldn't be like, it's not up to the Pixar standards. And I know that makes me sound like a snob, but Pixar sets such a high standard for itself.
Mm-hmm.
So looking forward, this is a little depressing, but there's five movies that they've announced. Finding Dory, which is coming out very soon. Cars 3. Coco, which is something about Dia de los Muertos, I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
And Toy Story 4 and The Incredibles 2. 4 out of 5 of these movies are sequels. This is the plan up till like 2020. This is for the next like 4 or 5 years. We're getting bombarded with Pixar sequels. And you know what? Every single one of these movies could be good, except for Cars 3. That's going to be terrible, probably. But every one of these could be good. But there is definitely something sad about a company that wouldn't do sequels for a long time and is now just like, sequels for everybody. You get a sequel. You get a sequel. You know, isn't there something like a little bit just not right about it?
Yeah, there is. But mostly with Toy Story 4. I have the biggest problem with that one.
I agree.
The Incredibles, sure, kind of has a place to go. Cars 3, whatever. Finding Dory, sure, whatever. Coco, cool, you got one original idea. Toy Story 4, though, you ended the story. You had the character arcs. You ended the story. Apparently, Toy Story 4 is supposed to be some sort of romantic comedy crap.
I know. I
just why?
It's like that's a bad idea. Like, look, and I don't have a problem with The Incredibles 2. That's, again, I've been saying, deserves a sequel. You know, it fits most with the sequel thing, especially because it's a superhero movie. But like, there's so many sequels. They're just going crazy with it. And Toy Story 4, yeah, totally unnecessary, beyond unnecessary.
Yeah, and they didn't even have plans for Toy Story 4 until like, geez, it wasn't even that long ago. I know these movies take years to develop, but
Well,
Yeah,
that's part of the problem is because they take you. If this was a company that put out like, 10 movies every year, I wouldn't care if half those movies were sequels. But because Pixar is so creative and this stuff takes so much time, so much of their resources are being used on sequels. And look, Finding Dory, based on the trailer and everything I've seen so far, I think I'm going to enjoy the movie. But it's not. It looks like it's just going to be a retread thematically, and another sequel that doesn't need to exist. It doesn't need to be its own thing. It's just kind of trying to be what the first movie is because that sold tickets.
yeah, that's what I was saying earlier, is that there's a good sequel that uses the original as sort of a springboard to tell a different story, but Finding Dory looks like the bad kind of sequel, where it just is like, oh, hey, that was in the original, let's just stay wallowed in that, and it'll sell.
And to be fair, we only know what's in the promotional materials so far. There could be a giant twist in the movie. It could go somewhere else. But everything, and maybe that's the marketing. Maybe the marketing wants us to feel like this is Finding Nemo again, and the movie will actually hit us with something. I know that Finding Nemo is a very precious film to a lot of the people at Pixar. It is. I don't think that Cars is as precious of a franchise as like Toy Story or Finding Nemo or The Incredibles. So I don't Cars 3, I mean, I don't want it to happen, but like
Whatever.
it can only go up from there, like you can't go worse than Cars 2, probably, right?
Oh, you could go worse than Cars 2. I
Well,
mean, for all intents and purposes, Cars 2 does have good cinematography, it's got good music, good animation.
But that's
You
all a
could do worse
given. That's all a given with Pixar. I don't think there'll ever be a movie that comes out that's like, oh, this Pixar movie looks ugly,
Yeah.
or
What I'm
has
saying
bad.
is just that you could technically do worse.
Yeah, but I don't think they would do worse. But yeah, the Toy Story 4 is the one that concerns me the most because unnecessary and hearing that it's going to be still about like Buddy was Woody
Woody?
and Buzz instead of like you said earlier, like with Monsters Inc. They could do a Toy Story movie that's about different toys,
Yeah,
and at
exactly.
least I wouldn't. I'd still feel some of the things I feel about the sequel, but at least it would be something new, something creatively justified.
Well, basically. Yeah, okay, just this is why I have such a huge problem with Toy Story 4, based on what I've heard about it.
Mm-hmm.
In Toy Story 3, this is how the exchange goes when they mention that Bo Peep is gone. Bo Peep? Yeah, and Bo. That's it. You think that deserves an entire movie?
No.
One tiny mention that Bo Peep is gone? I never cared about Bo Peep. She was just sort of there.
The Woody and Bo Peep thing always just kind of seemed like a little, just like, here's like a little wink wink, like here's his love interest. She's there.
Yeah. Bye.
I mean, that's all her roles were in the first one. Did she do anything in the second movie? I don't think so.
She didn't do jack in the second movie. She never even goes anywhere. She's always in Andy's room. She never leaves it.
Wheezy has a better story arc, or Weezer.
Oh, and you know what this tells me too? Again, this is hearsay based on what I'm seeing here. Well, it's not hearsay, it's conjecture. But this premise to me that Woody is going to go find Bo Peep is that it's basically just saving a princess in a tall tower story.
Well, if you want to get technical, that's every single Toy Story movie this far. I mean, I love all three of them, but every single one of them is character A must get rescue character B from something. Woody has to go back and get Buzz after he kicks him out of the house and find his way back to Andy's room. The second movie, Buzz has to go rescue Woody and get him back to Andy's room. And the third movie, everyone gets taken to the playroom and Woody tries to make them escape, and then eventually they escape and make it back to little girl's room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so if they were to do that again with Bo Peep, that's like, all right, come on, you were pushing it at 3.
Yeah,
or
but, that's they use the themes of it, as in like it's sort of structured around that idea. It's sort of a princess trapped in a tall tower kind of thing, but it's what they did in between that made it more interesting.
Oh yeah,
but this is just literally straight up, as far as I could tell, a princess in a tall tower story. I mean, do you think Bo Peep is going to do anything to get out herself? I mean, in Toy Story 2, Woody was trying to escape, but then he had reasons why he didn't escape, whatever. But this is just like, Bo Peep has never done a single thing, ever. So she's made of porcelain, so she does one thing and she's gonna break.
It sounds like maybe they want to do different things. Like they want to do a spy movie, they want to do a princess movie, they want to do a college movie, except someone, maybe Disney, maybe themselves, internally, still wants to hold on to the origins of Pixar. It's like, well, we got to do this sequel anyway, but I really want to do a spy movie, so let's just do both, even though it doesn't make any sense. Maybe there is, maybe it's backwards. Maybe there's something forcing them to do the sequels, and there is creativity there. It's just kind of being hampered by the original properties that they're kind of leeching off of.
That's what I'd like to think, but if it was the case, you would think that would be very evident. It's sort of like Pinky and the Brain and Elmira, is that it was very clear that the creators did not want to make it, but they just made the best of it. They just made the best of a bad situation kind of thing. But there's no indication that Pixar doesn't like what they're doing. They clearly do. But then all this stuff keeps coming out where it's like, well, is going to come out where it's like, seriously? You guys are on this? You believe in this? And again, we could be totally wrong about this. These movies, even Cars 3, could all be brilliant.
Well, I think even if they are brilliant, there is still something to be said about the unoriginality of it all.
It does sort of reflect the defeatist attitude at Pixar, Disney, whoever's responsible, that out of nearly half a decade's worth of movies are coming out, and only one of them is not a sequel.
And
and then there's 2 unknown ones too that might both be sequels.
After all these as well.
Yeah.
That's 2020. So to kind of to wrap things up here, I mean, yeah, this is kind of the problem. And the problem isn't just that Pixar is making sequels. The problem is that across the board, cinema, television, there is a real lack of original ideas and concepts. And even in movies that I loved and were originals in a lot of ways, the Peanuts movie and the Lego movie, both of those are still based off of existing franchises. There's a real starvation for new ideas, and Pixar used to be a bastion of creativity and different thinking and all of these weird concepts that I can't think of, apparently, because I've got anthropomorphic bows and arrows. But now it's like, it's the problem that everything else in Hollywood is having, and now it's infected Pixar. Pixar was a place that this didn't happen to, but now it's like the mighty have fallen, and that's how I feel. I'm going to still watch Pixar films. I don't hate Pixar. I'm not some snob that's like, Pixar ruined everything. But I do think that there is a little bit of disappointment in going down that route, even if every single one of these films is just out of the park amazing. And I do feel like I will like Finding Dory. I still think that the unoriginality, just even in the titles, Finding Dory, Cars 3, Toy Story 4, and The Incredibles 2, those could change, but those titles are unoriginal in and of themselves. I think it speaks for itself. Any last words?
I feel like Pixar is in a similar situation to Nintendo right now, which Pixar and Nintendo are 2 of my favorite companies in the world. And is
Agreed.
Much in the vein of Nintendo is that they have such a legacy. They're part of so many of our lives. They've enriched our lives with so much good content that it's painful to see it when they stumble like this, when they do stupid things. I would never ever wish for either of these companies to fall, to be defeated,
No.
Because they're such a huge part of my life. They've made so much good stuff that I would never wish death and failure upon them. But the problem is that they've gotten to that point where they don't really have to try anymore. They are such an integral and important part of our lives that they don't have to try as hard anymore because they know butts are going to be in seats no matter what.
And this is something that actually ties into a video I made recently about SpongeBob going on forever, and how, because SpongeBob is financially successful, just like all of these Pixar movies are, even what is considered the worst one, still super financially successful, there's no reason for Pixar to change. There's no reason for them to care. I mean, I do believe that at the core of Pixar, there are people who really do care. John Lasseter and Brad Bird. I know these people care, but I'm just saying even from just the corporate overlord that Disney is, there's no reason for them to do anything different than what they're doing right now, is just coasting, put out some sequels, put out some ideas that are, even the original ideas that are based on older Disney movies and stuff. There's no reason for them not to, because they're making bank.
Yeah. And that I think is one of the core problems, is that it's about money now.
Yeah.
And I
It
know
always
that,
was, but
that wasn't
more
the
so.
they
Yeah.
were really good at hiding it. That's the thing. Of course it was always about money. Everything is about money, but they were so good at hiding it. They clearly wanted to tell stories and make characters and have adventures that meant something to people and also make money.
Yeah,
You
so
know?
there's always got to be a balance because, like, I'm not anti-capitalist. I think it's great that these people are making a living and lots of money for doing great work. But I get upset when it's all about the money and there's just no creativity. I don't think Pixar's reached that level yet. But
No.
when there's a balance between artistic integrity and doing something because bills have to get paid, and the scales are starting to tip in a direction that I don't like.
Yeah. And it's also because there's so much money invested into these movies. Ridiculous amounts of money invested into these movies that, like I said, they had to stoop. They had to generalize their material so that it could appeal to most people. And Nintendo is just as guilty of this as well. They're just homogenizing their ideas to the most bland and inoffensive,
Well, ironically,
the most bland thing they possibly can just to get the largest return, because the things that they make are so expensive that they don't have a choice now.
But ironically, I'd say that the movies that came before, with Toy Story 3 and before, were way more open to everyone than the ones that have come out now, which feel like there are times in these movies I feel like I'm being, like the audience is squarely at a child. And where I feel like, man, all the movies that came before, you could have set anyone down, and they could appreciate it. And that's how Pixar got their name. And so if what you're saying is true and they are trying to kind of go for a wider appeal, I think they got it backwards. Maybe they're just going for the wider kid appeal.
Yeah, but that's the problem. Is one good thing about Pixar, well, among the other really good things, is that, yeah, you could totally just take your kid to shut him up for an hour and a half to the movie, but you could still have a good time too as an adult or a parent. You can still enjoy the characters and the story and everything while your kid is just, enjoying the colors and the lights and all that junk.
The first scene in Finding Nemo with a barracuda attack, that scene was not for the kids in the audience. That scene was for the adults to make them understand why Marlin is the way he is. Mm-hmm. There was a joke on The Simpsons about how Bart doesn't think that there is a chapter 1 on Finding Nemo because Marge always skipped through it. One of the more inspired jokes on the later half of that show. But the scene at the beginning of Up. Who's that for? That's not for kids.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Don't get me started on Up.
That's not for kids. But who's the scene at the start of Cars 2 for? I don't even remember. It's something stupid about spies.
On a boat.
Yeah. Characters we don't even know introduced new to the sequel. So that's about all I have to say. I think we've discussed this very thoroughly.
Yeah. All I can say is just finish it off with this incredibly overused quote, but is very apropos at the moment. You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. I feel that that's apropos here.
I paraphrased that quote many times for television.
I'm tired of saying it, but it's kind of true. And not to say that Pixar will ever become a bad film company. I really hope that doesn't happen. But if they keep doing what they're doing, people are going to lose faith in them. And that's just the way it goes. They'll lose that seal of quality. It's like the Nintendo seal of quality. It used to mean something at some point, but then just became pointless and stupid.
Let me flip my tinfoil hat on right here and say that this is actually all a ploy by Disney to get them back in the spotlight. Disney Animation has been taking a second to Pixar for too long.
I wouldn't even be surprised if that were true, because ever since 2012, I think Disney has been making very good sort of entry into
Wreck-It Ralph.
Yes, Wreck-It Ralph I think was the pinnacle. Frozen, I've already given my thoughts on that in a review. Same with Big Hero 6. Neither of those, I believe, deserve to win the Oscar, but whatever. The Oscars. According to Mr. Ralph Bakshi, he told me right to my face, he said to me that the Oscars are a big joke. So I'm taking Mr. Bakshi's word on it.
I believe that. I believe all award shows are. Literally every single one. But my agenda aside, I'm going to wrap things up here. So want to give your plugs again?
Oh, well, I mean, if you want to see some of my opinions on Disney movies, I actually haven't reviewed any Pixar movies yet, because I want to do them all at once. But yeah, if you want to see some of my reviews, you can always check out my channel, because yeah, I do 2 videos every week and 1 live stream. So yeah, if you do check it out, I hope you enjoy it.
There'll be a link in the description and an annotation and all that stuff. You know how it goes. Thank you very much for coming on here. You've been awesome to talk to.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
All right. PIEGUYRULZ out.
All right. See you later.